guys. I hope y'all are doing well, and I hope you had a good Thanksgiving. Today we're going to do a study on Genesis 1, and we're going to pretty much stay in just this one chapter because I want to see if we had nothing else in the Bible, if we had no other scriptures but one chapter of the Bible, the very first one, what could we learn about God? What could we learn about His characteristics, maybe even his personality some? What could we glean from this? Nothing else, just one chapter. And I know that there's probably a huge collective sigh of relief that you won't see me flipping and taking about 30 minutes flipping pages. So this should be a pretty straightforward, quick video, hopefully. Only one place we're going to go to at the very end, but just because I wanted to. So Genesis 1 through 2. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The earth was without form, void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So what can we learn right here? One verse. That God existed before the creation itself. Before the beginning, God existed. Before time itself, God existed. Therefore, God must be timeless. And it says that God created, which means He has to have a mind. He has to have a will. He is not an impersonal deist God that some people try to claim, as in an impersonal force. See, an impersonal deist God it has no will at all. It just is there. It just exists. It doesn't do anything. It's like a chair. It just is there. See, but this shows that God is personal. He can interact with His own creation. So God is a spirit. It says God's spirit moved upon the face of the water. He moves over in a proactive creative force. God didn't create an angel and let the angel create. It is God that is doing the prime moving of creation itself. So He is a spiritual being with agency, personal. He has a will and a mind of His own beyond the scope of the universe. And He is the only mover of all creation coming into existence. And He's absolutely mind, beyond any mind we can comprehend, genius. To create every atom in the universe. Everything. Is hard to imagine. But that's what we get out of just the first couple verses. Next up, and God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And He saw the light that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness He called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. Now I want you to remember the evening and mornings over and over again. That's going to come in at the very end of the video, so just keep that in mind. So what can we learn of how we can learn how God chooses to create something. He speaks it into existence. Just speaks it into existence. Now, an interesting thing, whenever you speak, what is the sound wave is nothing but vibrations from your voice box. You're creating vibrational sound waves. And that's how we hear it. We hear the vibrations. Now, every atom within the universe, everything from this chair, this book, this coat I'm wearing, and you yourself is held together by atoms. Now, nobody knows why, but all the atoms in the universe have to vibrate. They have to vibrate at a certain perfect level. If there's one atom gets out of place, everything is kaput. Creation, the universe falls apart. But they're all vibrating perfectly in order. Now, God speaks something into an existence, and it's almost like His very voice is what's created the vibrating atoms that hold the creation together. But because Scripture also says later, now this is not what I'm just going to add this in, that God, by the power of His speech, God holds the universe together. He holds all things together. We would not be here if it was not for God upholding it to begin with. Okay? By the power of His Word. So God introduces something here. He produces a standard. Now, this could be an ethical or moral standard because God says it is good. That means there must be a bad. So his will and agency is good. And for his first act was creating light and separating it from darkness. So we can see the balance. God is a balanced being. He is not off kilter or you know, I don't know the right word, but he's very balanced. Perfect. Okay? And for him to create something and call it good. So that means that God himself has to be a moral being. He has to be a righteous being and a just being to be able to judge something. And that's another thing. God judges his own creation. Right from the beginning, he looks upon it and says it is good. So therefore, God is a righteous judge of his creation. Okay? Now, we also, before I continue, God speaks and creates order. And so order, the moral and natural laws, all into existence. So we have the logistical laws that govern the universe, that hold things into being, but then we have the moral laws that universe will be judged by. So we see that all right at the beginning. 6 through 8. God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning, second day." So, is God just separating, you know, waters on earth here? Is he just making continents appear? Well, he's obviously setting up the earth. So we know that God is doing something here when he's dividing the water. Now, one thing that every scientist will tell you is that without plate tectonics, this world would not support life. You have to have plate tectonics, otherwise we'd all be sitting in a bowl of water. Everybody. The whole world would be underwater if it was not for plate tectonics. Mountains rising, sea levels being forced down. So that may be what God is doing here. Another interesting thing, this is just a side note. This is just conjecture, just for fun to talk about. You know, I'm not saying I buy into this, but it's just something to think about, okay? That's all. In the ancient Near East, like the Egyptians, the Canaanites, and all these people that were living in the ancient Near East, they believed waters were kind of like a physical barrier between the spiritual world and the physical world. And so you see that a lot in their artwork. For instance, in Egyptians, they believed that the lotus flower is what birthed the universe or birthed the earth or whatever. It came up through the water and it bloomed. So I'm not saying that this is talking about the spiritual water, separating the spiritual dimension from the physical dimension. It's just something fun to think about. You know, maybe these waters could be something more than what it says, or it could be literally just physically separating the waters. Okay? Now let's go to 13. And God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear." There's plate tectonics, which is probably what God is doing. It's probably not the spiritual thing that I was saying, but it's just something possible that's also may be in there. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters was called seas. And God saw that it was good. Once again, we see the moral law coming in. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, and herb yielding seed, and the fruit yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth." And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and the herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good, and it was evening and morning, the third day. So God creates the continents. Now he has the dry land. He creates the plants that are needed for the air we breathe to get the atmosphere into balance. Water is essential first. So water first, then the plants for food. Okay? We have the water cycle, the gas cycles in the atmosphere. All must be working in tandem for life to exist. You can't have one section that is off kilter for life to exist. You have to have it all perfectly balanced, which comes into play with what we were saying in the first few verses. So to where we see that God is a perfectly balanced and in tune and righteous being. So the next part we're going to go to is verses 14 through 19. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of heaven." Okay. Once again, we see that God is creating light again. Okay, to give light upon the earth, and it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. And He made the stars also. Isn't it interesting that God doesn't seem to be making darkness? It is void, formless, dark, and God is the one that is creating light. It is God that is constantly bringing light into the darkness, piercing through the darkness of the universe. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good, and the evening and morning was the fourth day." Now, many would see this as crazy. What did I just get done saying? We have to have everything in order for there to be life, right? How can there be life on earth if there's no sun? If there's no sun and light before the plants, how can there be plants, right? We'll get back to that at the end of the video. But just hold on to that thought. So God creates things for other beings that are yet to be created to use. He creates the stars. Then we use them for navigation. I mean, we would not be here. And most of the people watching, it don't matter what continent you're on, unless you're like in the original, like Europe or Africa or something like that, you probably wouldn't be there without the navigation and the signs of the stars to help our ancestors get there. We have the moon to guide us and to help us with gauging time. It just so happens that the moon is about a month, and then we have the moon is the perfect size, where it would focus right on the earth, or right between the earth and the sun. It's 93 times smaller than the sun, yet 93 times further away from the sun, or whatever. I'm not sure if you got them in the correct order, but you know what I mean, where it is perfectly aligned to a solar eclipse. You know the chances of that happening? Without the moon, there'd be no life on earth, because you have to have the tides, you have to have the moon, and you have to have the heat from the sun. All these different things we are seeing God's perfect, His genius at play, His perfectly balanced work. And He's doing this step by step by step. Like I said, hold on to the days issue. We're going to get back to it. So God creates the moon for tides. Without it, life would fail. To stabilize the orbit of the earth, because the earth tilts. And without the moon to stabilize it, we would be all over the place. As you see other planets that are without moons, where they would be, you can see wildly varying temperatures. Earth is very uniform, very stable, almost like a cradle of sorts. So God has an ordered plan. He is not a chaotic being where He's just throwing stuff at the wall. He is very precise, very orderly at what He's doing. Is beyond genius, creating laws and objects to be made and be used by someone else that He hasn't created yet. So He has something else in mind while He is creating things. It's like He has another goal that is beyond just this singular goal, this singular goal, this singular goal. He has something else He is looking forward to. So let's find out more about what that could be. So 20 to 25. And God said, "Let the waters bring forth abundantly, and moving creature that hath life, and the fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. And God created great whales and every living creature that moveth, which waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and upon the wing and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let the fowl multiply in the earth. The evening and morning, the fifth day." Something that I just noticed here, and I didn't catch it when I was doing my notes, is it says God blessed them. God blessed them. That's interesting. That is something I would like to look more into after this video. The concept of God creating something, and then not just creating and saying good luck. Like a lot of people think that God does, like He just creates something and then pieces out. He's not listening, what some people think. God takes an interactive stance with His creation, with us, where He blesses them. He interacts with them in a positive, perfect light. So God creates the first living animals with minds. Most of these are just animals with instincts, but mind nonetheless. You can't have a mind created without something greater mind. You can't get a computer created without a programmer. You have to have a great mind that is at work in here. So once again, see creatures first, and so on. God intends this place to be something that is to last a long time. It is not something, spur of the moment where it is very short-lived, like our creations. We can build a nice truck or something, but then give it about a decade, the darn thing breaks down and then starts to rust away. That's not the way God is. God makes something to last. And God puts instincts into every creature with a mind, ways for them to continue to exist and to multiply, to fill the earth. So the food chain, the food web is now created on earth. Now let's get to one of the most important parts concerning us. God said, let us make man in our image and our likeness, and let him have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. And God blessed them. Once again, we see that blessed moment where he is personally invested within his creation. He's personally invested with us. And God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply, replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. God said, behold, I give you every herb-bearing seed, things he's already created, he is creating for us. And every tree which is in the fruit, every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed, you shall be for me. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every herb for meat. And it was so. And God saw that everything that he had made, behold, it was very good, that evening and morning, the sixth day. So God creates man. He creates a caretaker. God gives power unto one of his creations. He gives free will for this being to interact with his surroundings, to create things around within the world. So he is not a God that is just domineering and pushing and beating. He's one that actually gives somebody. He gives up power, or gives power unto us. God is always sovereign, but he allows man to have authority of his own, to caretake the earth. So God puts his image on us. To create is an act of love in and itself. So God puts his holy image, his glorified image on us. And so we see that God right there must be a God of love for somebody to act, the act of creation itself, and then to bless it and to bestow hope and glory upon it. There has to be an act of love. So we see that God has a loving nature. And then we see that God creates a hierarchy for balance, to keep everything in the order for it to continually to flow and to work precisely. And my wonderful girlfriend mentioned something. I asked her to go through some of this too. I already mentioned a couple of things she said, but she said something I really thought was really interesting and deep. She said, there must be a shepherd for the sheep at all times. That's very interesting, that God creates the whole earth, fills it, and yet he creates a shepherd to take care of it. He creates man to rule over it. Now Adam, of course, is, he ends up falling, but just notice something else, that when Jesus comes along, he is called the second Adam. He is what does Jesus say? I am the good shepherd. Adam was the first shepherd who failed, but Jesus is the last shepherd who conquered, who ruled over the earth and rules today and forever. I just think that's an interesting thing that she brought up. I love that. And so God creates perfection, order, and love. Now, do you remember what we talked about? That thing I mentioned about the days. How God is, creating stuff. This is the third day, this is the fourth day, and so forth. So, how could God do this? Well, we're going to get to that in just a second. But I want for us to understand the concept of God choosing to create within certain time frames, instead of Jim just speaking everything in one single moment, which he could do. He's God. Look at what he created. There's nothing beyond his scope. This place is massive, insane, incredible how big it is, and how logical and perfect and balanced it is. So we see that, jeez, God. But he could do it in an instant. But he chooses to do and act within the very time that he himself created. He chooses to act within time. So he could have done everything in an instant, but chooses to have creative decisions within the timeline. This is important when we're looking at Scripture, because it helps us to understand when God says something here, it doesn't necessarily mean he means that for here. Okay? God says, Noah, build an ark. It doesn't mean we need to go build an ark. It was a specific moment where God personally acts within the time frame he created. And so we see God being a super powerful, strong, genius, loving, personal being that is beyond any scope we could ever imagine, right out of the first chapter of the Bible. Now we still have that last thing I wanted to talk about. How could God allow there to be light? Or how could there be life on earth without the sun to give light, right? Go to Revelation 22, 1 through 5. And he showed me a pure, this is the new heavens and the new earth, okay? He showed me a river of life, a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding out of the throne of God and of the Lamb. And in the midst of the street of it, and on either side of the river, was there a tree of life, which bare 12 manner of fruits, and yielded her fruit every month, and the leaves of the tree were for healing of the nation. And there shall be no more curse. That is later to come in the 3rd chapter of Genesis, where Adam sinned. But the throne of God and the Lamb shall be in it, and his servants shall serve him. So no more is mankind in this future day hampered, pulled down, destroyed by the curse that sin brought into the world. This is something new. And they shall see his face, and his name shall be in their foreheads, and there shall be no night there. Why? They shall need no candle, neither light of the sun. Why? For the Lord God giveth them light, and they shall reign forever and ever. So the very essence of God is him giving forth and bearing light unto a dark and voidless existence. Isn't that interesting? So we can see the very nature of God within his creation, the 1st chapter. And I hope that this was an interesting study. I know that there's tons more that I missed and didn't get. But thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate you all so very much. And I hope y'all have a very blessed evening. Take care.